Hi guys, today's our topic of discussion is pharmacokinetics. What we are going to study in pharmacokinetics is membrane transport, absorption and distribution of drugs. What is pharmacokinetics? I've already told you what the body does to the drug. Whenever we are taking a drug, the reaction body is showing towards the drugs, like its absorption, its distribution and excretion from the body comes under the pharmacokinetics. Okay, pharmacokinetics is the quantitative study of drug movement in, through and out of the body. Intensity of effect is related to concentration of the drug at the site of action, which depends on its pharmacokinetic properties. The drug movement in, through and out of the body. In means absorption, through is distribution and out is excretion. Okay. Pharmacokinetic properties of particular drug is important to determine the route of administration, dose, onset of action, peak action time, duration of action and frequency of dosing. So we are going to study all these in the next slides, all the properties of pharmacokinetics. Okay. First is membrane transport. Like whenever we are taking a drug, it should cross some membrane. Membrane transport is how drugs cross biological membranes to enter or exit cells. Membranes are selectively permeable barriers composed of lipids and proteins. Drugs must navigate these barriers to reach their target sites of action. Look at the diagram. You can see there is some proteins and lipids which collectively making the membrane. Here we have used the term barriers. There are so many barriers like blood-brain barrier and different kind of barriers which we will study in further lectures. Here is absorption, distribution, metabolism and excretion are sometimes referred to collectively as ADME, which we have already studied. These processes determine when the drug appears in the bloodstream and for how long it remains there. Let's go to the next slide. Our representation of the four fundamental pathways of drug movement and modification in the body, the ADME process. You can see in the diagram, there is an absorption of the drug in dosage form, release, drug solution. Okay? Oral form, solution or anything we are taking, and its dosage will go to distribution. Here it will distribute into the blood and then excrete out in the form of urine, bile, feces, sweat, saliva. The intensity of response is related to concentration of the drug at the site of action, which in turn is dependent on its pharmacokinetic properties. The intensity of the drug is dependent on the concentration of the drug and site of action. Pharmacokinetic consideration therefore determines the routes of administration, dose, latency of onset, time of peak action, duration of action, and frequency of administration of the drug. Here you can see latency of onset. Latency of onset means that how much time a drug is taking to show its action. Dosage, time of peak of action, like when it shows us action. Duration of action, like some medicines it shows it actions for 8 hours, some for 12 hours, and depending upon the dosage. And frequency of administration of a drug, once a day, some twice a day. Now here comes absorption. Absorption is the transfer of a drug from its site of administration to the bloodstream. The rate and extent of absorption depends on the route of administration, the formulation and chemical properties of the drug, and physiologic factors that can impact the site of absorption. Absorption is the transfer of drug from its site of administration. Site of administration means if we are taking some oral drugs, we have to take it from mouth, and from there it will go to the bloodstream. The rate and extent of absorption depends on the route of administration. Like if we are taking oral drugs, it will take a longer duration compared to the drug which we take in a IV form. Also depends on the formulation and chemical properties of the drug. When a drug is administered intravenously, absorption is not required because the drug is transferred from the administration device directly into the bloodstream. When we take injection, the absorption is not required. Why? Because the dosage is directly going into the bloodstream and is showing its effects. So there is no need of absorption. Okay. Next is bioavailability. Bioavailability, I have already told you, is the absorption of the drug. It refers to the rate and extent of the absorption of a drug from a dosage form as determined by its concentration time curve in blood or by its excretion in urine. We'll study this from the graph. When you see here, the concentration of the drug which is injected is faster compared to the drug which we have given in the oral form. Okay, and how we calculate the bioavailability? AUC, area under the curve, oral by AUC injected into 100. Why 100? Because bioavailability is calculated in percentage. Next, bioavailability. The relationship between the drug dose and the amount ultimately delivered to the bloodstream is defined as bioavailability and is generally expressed as a percentage. So this I have already explained. If a 1 gram dose of a drug is administered by mouth and half of that reaches the systemic circulation, the drug is 50% bioavailable. That means the absorption of the drug is only 50%. Next is active transport. It requires energy, is inhibited by metabolic poisons, and transport the solute against its electrochemical gradients, resulting in selective accumulation of the substance on one side of the membrane. And passive diffusion is, it depends on the concentration gradient. Drug given as concentrated solution is absorbed faster than from dilute solutions. Here the concentrated solution will absorb more fast than the dilute solution. Route of administration. This affects drug absorption because each route has its own peculiarities. Again, we'll read route of administration here. This affects drug absorption because each route has its own peculiarities. Oral, subcutaneous and intramuscular, topical sites. Oral. When a tablet or capsule is swallowed, it must dissolve before it can be absorbed. The dissolving of a tablet or capsule is referred to as dissolution. Like if we are taking some tablet or capsule with water or any other liquid, it should first dissolve and then it will get absorbed inside our body. The dissolving of the tablet or capsule is dissolution. What is dissolution? Dissolution process of dissolving or separating into component parts. Next is highly water soluble medication dissolve more readily in the GI tract while fat soluble drugs dissolve more slowly. If the tablet is water soluble, it will dissolve faster than the fat soluble drugs in your GI tract. What is GI tract? It is gastrointestinal tract. Okay. It is very common. Like if it is water soluble, it will get dissolved in water quickly, and fat, as you know, that oil takes longer and harder time to dissolve in water. Drug particles in the bloodstream are available to undergo biochemical changes referred to as metabolism in the liver or other tissues. Finally, the drug and its metabolites are excreted from the body in urine or feces. That is what referred to as metabolism. Metabolism is the total of all processes used by organisms to produce and maintain all cells and systems. Metabolism and excretion are both pathways of drug elimination from the body. Excretion is what? The act of process of excreting one form of elimination from the body. Once the drug metabolizes inside the body, it will excrete out in the form of urine or feces. Now, the next one is subcutaneous and intramuscular. By these routes, the drug is deposited directly in the vicinity of the capillaries. Lipid-soluble drugs pass readily across the whole surface of the capillary endothelium. Capillaries having large paracellular spaces do not obstruct absorption of even large lipid-insoluble molecules or ions. Can you see the diagram here? It is usual capillary and this is a brain capillary. Whenever we take the drug, it should pass the intercellular pores. Here if you can see. In between the endothelial cells, this will help in the easy absorption of the drug. But when you come brain capillaries, here is a tight junction of lipid insoluble polar drugs, usual capillary with large paracellular spaces through which even large lipid insoluble molecules diffuse. Capillary constituting blood-brain or blood-CSF barrier, tight junctions between capillary endothelial cells and investment of glial processes or choroidal epithelium do not allow passage of non-lipid soluble molecules and ions. Next is topical site. Topical site means skin, cornea, mucous membrane. Systemic absorption after topical application depends primarily on lipid soluble of the drugs. However, only few drugs significantly penetrate intact skin. Intact means your healthy skin. Cornea is permeable to lipid soluble unionized physostigmine but not to highly ionized neostigmine. Mucous membranes of mouth, rectum, vagina absorb lipophilic drugs. I think this is understood. Next is distribution. Once a drug is absorbed into the bloodstream, it can be carried throughout the body. This process is called distribution and is a reversible process. Once we take the drug, it will get absorbed into the blood and then it will distribute throughout the body. Blood flow to different organs of the body is not equal. The blood flow is happening in our body is not equal in all organs. So the distribution of the drug depends on the frequency of the blood flow. The most vitally important organs of the body receive the greatest supply of the blood. These organs include the brain, liver, and kidneys. These are the organs which receive the most blood supply, that is brain, liver, and kidney. The extent and pattern of distribution of a drug depends on its lipid solubility, ionization at physiological pH, extent of binding to plasma and tissues proteins, presence of tissue-specific transporters, differences in regional blood flow. So first is lipid solubility. The drug whichever we are taking, if it is lipid soluble or not. Ionization at physical pH. Drug pH matters a lot during distribution. Extent of binding to plasma and tissue proteins. Before distribution, the drug will bind to the plasma and tissue, that also affects distribution. Presence of tissue-specific transporters. Differences in regional blood flow. Alright, thank you. Let's wind up.